In preparation for this video, I've been practicing my accents. I'm well good at the British ones. I've got a lot of variety. I'm almost out when it comes to US and Australian accents. Just threw a little bit in there. I can't quite do them. But this is what I want to do. I want to look at sort of like, I want to look at national recommendations for physical activity. How do you spell recommendation? Recommendation. Is it double C? I might have misspelled that. Anyway, I think I have. National recommendations for physical activity. And I want to sort of go through these one at a time and look for sort of shared principles across them. So let's go through it. With adults, first of all, this is what the UK government recommends. It recommends a minimum, by the way, these are all minimums, of 150 mins per week of physical activity that's strenuous enough to get you out of breath and to cause a sweat. And it recommends that of these, 75 of them are vigorous. Okay, a vigorous physical activity. So more than doing the garden, more than washing the car, doing some kind of exercise. It also recommends that two of the 5 half an hours, makes 150 of course, what they say is that 2 of those should be strengthening sessions and involve some kind of resistance. Strengthening sessions, that could be lifting things, it could be weight training, for example. And they also recommend, the Brits, they also recommend to reduce, down arrow, extended sitting periods. Now, sitting periods. So I think that's interesting. Okay, so that's our UK recommendation. I think this one's really interesting. If we look at this last one, and then we look at what most British people do, these are adults, so, going to college, going to work, going to university, what do we tend to do? Exceptions, of course. We tend to sit down. Our sort of society is based around sitting down, being sedentary, for want of a better word. Now, what do the US recommend? Well, have a look at this, folks. They recommend 150 mins per week. I'm seeing a bit of per week. I'm seeing a bit of consistency here. They're recommending 75 of them, guess what? Vigorous. They're going to say, or what the US states, is that there are far more benefits. The benefits are far greater for over 300 minutes. So it's saying minimum of 150, but really try and get to 300. And then it's saying muscle strengthening. That's exactly what we had before. Muscle strengthening. Guess how many times? Times 2 per week. So the US has got consistency, but it's being more aspirational. It's asking people to get up to maybe 300 minutes. And then finally, with regards to the US, have a look at this. They are approaching this slightly differently. They are recommending between 2.5 hours to 5 hours. 2.5 to 5 hours. So obviously here with 2.5 hours, we're talking there about 150 minutes here. That's 150 up to 300 minutes. Okay, of moderate intensity is exactly what the wording is. Moderate intensity. And moreover, they're arguing that of these 1.25 hours to 2.5 hours, so up to half of that, well, it is half of that depending on how much you do, should be rigorous. So actually, if you look at the proportion of this, the Australians are arguing for a more rigorous proportion of activity. They also talk about muscle strengthening times 2 a week. Okay, and finally, limit sitting and lying down. Okay, sitting and lying down. Now we're going to get into ideas about lying down when we look at more things to do with sleep. But we've got consistency there for adults to some degree. There are distinctions and differences. Effectively, what we are being told across these sort of developed nations is that 5 lots of 30 minutes per week is minimum. Half of them need to be done as vigorous, and there need to be strengthening sessions. And that we shouldn't be sedentary. This is a nice word for you to learn. Sedentary. We shouldn't be sedentary. Sedentary is extended periods of lying and sitting down, exactly what we've got down here. Now, how does that sort of translate when we look at teenagers? Now, obviously, we could look at kids here as well, the younger kids, but you guys are likely to be teenagers, so I want to sort of focus on that. What do the Brits say? Well, it basically says 60 minutes a day. And then all of the guidelines are the same. But this time we're looking at more activity. Obviously, here we're talking about what's that going to be? It's going to be 400 and what's 7 times 6 or 420 minutes of activity per week. With regard to the US, what are we doing here? We are recommending, or they are recommending, 60 mins per day. 60 mins per day. No surprise there, given what I've just written. But they're saying vigorous 3 times a week. So 3 times a week should be more vigorous activity. The strengthening, the muscle strengthening, which presumably is going to coincide with this, is going to be 3 times a week. They don't need to be separate, by the way. Obviously, they could be one and the same thing. And also, they're specifically talking about bone strengthening exercise, obviously in the growth phase of times 3 a week as well. So this starts to touch on more high intensity, weight bearing aspects of sport, actually resistance things that will actually strengthen the bone matrix and so on. So we've got some details there. And in Australia, we've got the ideas of 60 mins per day of activity. Remember, absolute minimums. We're talking about vigorous times 3. Vigorous, that's a note, times 3. We're talking about muscle and bone strengthening times 3. So again, we've got consistency across that model. I think what we're saying with teenagers, obviously, there's a growth aspect to this. And there is a balance, of course, to teenagers growing, developing that sort of resistance and muscular and skeletal work, and obviously for that to be too much to be impacting. No one's saying here that people should be doing thousands of minutes a week of strength and exercises. There might be exceptions where people do that, but of course it's going to be less common. So I just wanted to get those points across to you and to maybe to show you what healthy would be considered to be. Now, I didn't look at all statistics for this, but I did notice that in the UK, we've got greater than 60% of the adult population not active. In other words, most people don't achieve this. I noticed in the US that the last statistic I saw was that greater than 75% of US citizens are not active by these sorts of standards. Now, with that in mind, we need to be considering what are the impacts of that, both positive when you do this and negative for someone who doesn't. So we're going to obviously have a look at those in different tutorials. Cheers.